The people of the 19th century had also seen a war in their life that did not last 10 to 20 years, but only for 38 minutes. For the first time in history, the news of a war ended before it reached anywhere. The Anglo-Zanzibar War, which was fought in Africa, has also set the world record for being the smallest war in the world by the Guinness Book. But the question is, which two countries were involved in the Anglo-Zanzibar War? And how was it decided in just 45 minutes? Viewers, this historical war took place on this island, which used to be an island country in the Indian Ocean called Zanzibar. Zanzibar used to be under the control of the Sultanate of Oman, only 40 kilometers from the coast of East Africa. Everything was going fine, but then there was an entry of such a power that tried to rule over Zanzibar and East Africa through politics. Yes, we are talking about British rule. The British Empire had already had an eye on Zanzibar Island along with East Africa. They had to take advantage of the strategic location here and somehow bring the precious resources here under their control. The British considered themselves to be quite advanced, especially in the face of Eastern countries, i.e., India, Africa, and many Arab countries. But because Zanzibar Island was under the control of Oman and the British could not fulfill this dream until it was removed from the control of the Omani Empire. At that time, the Sultan of Oman was Said bin Sultan. He was a very fearless man. He did not compromise his principles in any way. This was the reason why he was often known as the Lion of Oman. Now it is obvious that it was not possible for the British Empire to occupy any part of Oman while he was alive. In 1856, when he died, his sons rushed to the throne of Oman. This was the point when Oman was divided into two parts. The eldest son, Thuwaini bin Sarid, took over the throne of Oman, and the youngest son, Majid bin Sarid, separated Zanzibar from Oman and made it a new country. Zanzibar, which had been part of Oman for many centuries, many Arab sultans refused to accept Zanzibar as a new country by the decision of Majid bin Said. But the British Empire did not have a better chance than this. They immediately put their hands on the head of Majid bin Said and accepted Zanzibar as a new country. Anyway, the British Empire had now entered the politics here. Zanzibar's main source of income was the world's last slave market, i.e., the market where slaves were traded. Slaves were brought from the mainland of Africa to Zanzibar Island by ropes. In the ship, slaves often opened their ropes and jumped into the Indian Ocean. Some fell ill and some died of suffocation during a short journey of only 40 kilometers. Their corpses were mercilessly thrown into the sea. They were sold in the slave market in Zanzibar. Here, hundreds of slaves were kept in small cells, with little air and without eating or drinking. Slave sacks looked like they were first lined up and tied with trees. And then everyone was whipped hard. The one who endured more and did not cry or scream even after being whipped cost more. Years passed and Zanzibar's sultans also changed. Their main income source was the slave market and the greatest support of the British. A magnificent palace was built for the Sultan in Zanzibar, which was right on the seafront. This palace had every facility for the Sultan that was not even possible to imagine at that time. Most importantly, this palace was the first building in East Africa to have an electricity connection. Most of the woodwork was done in this palace, and all the existing buildings were connected to each other by a bridge. Now at this point, the British had a very bad impression of Zanzibar's slave market, because they were the ones who supported the Sultan of Zanzibar. Therefore, they put pressure on the Sultan of Zanzibar to close the slave market. After a lot of efforts and agreements, the last slave market in the world was closed forever in 1873. One thing was clear in all this, that the British were gaining control of Zanzibar. Let's fast forward to 25th August, 1896. Zanzibar's pro-British Sultan suddenly dies. He was poisoned by his own cousin Khalid bin Bargash and became the Sultan of Zanzibar. That too without the will of the British, because the British wanted the next Sultan to be of their own free will. And for this work, they chose Hamoud bin Muhammad. When the British learned of Khalid bin Bargash's conspiracy, they sent a message to his palace, in which there was a direct threat. The threat said that the palace should be empty by 9 a.m. on 27th of August. Khalid, the new Sultan of Zanzibar, gathered his forces and locked himself in the palace. With the threat, the ships of the British Navy surrounded Zanzibar Island from all sides. The next 2 nights, there was a lot of tension in the palace. An hour before the end of the ultimatum on 27th of August, the British consul received a message from the Sultan, in which it was written that he is ready to end the matter with a deal. The British consul replied that a deal can only be made if you accept our order. At 8:30, Khalid sent another message that I have no intention of leaving the throne of Zanzibar, and I don't think the British will dare to fight us. The British consul replied that we have no intention of attacking either, but that doesn't mean we can't attack. At this time, there were 2,128 guards outside the magnificent palace of Zanzibar. Some civilians, some guards of the palace, and hundreds of servants and slaves of the Sultan were also present. In addition to this, a ship was also built outside the Sultan's palace in the Indian Ocean to confront the Royal Navy. It was the HHS Glasgow Royal Yard of 32,000 pounds at that time, which was gifted to the Sultan of Zanzibar by Queen Victoria in 1873. In addition to this, 2 steamboats of Zanzibar were also present to confront the British Royal Navy. At exactly 9 o'clock, when the ultimatum given to the Sultan was over, 2 cruiser ships of the British Navy, 3 gunboats, and 150 Marines began to move towards the island. Remember that the competition of these 150 people was with the Sultan's 2,800 guards. At exactly 9:02, 3 gunboats, Raccoons, Thrushes, and Sparrows opened a blinding fire on the palace. In the first attack, the 12-pounder cannon inside the palace was destroyed. In the attack, the Sultan's Royal Yard HHS Glasgow was also destroyed in a single blow. But because it was standing on the harbor where the water was low, the upper part of it was out of water. The Glasgow crew immediately showed the British flag and surrendered themselves. The Britishers planned to arrest Sultan Khalid bin Bargash and take him to India. But on the first fire, the Sultan fled from the palace with his other Arab companions. 500 of the Sultan's 2,800 soldiers were killed by heavy bombardment. The British Navy fired a total of 500 shells, 4,100 rounds of machine guns, and 1,000 rounds of rifles. At 9:37, the British soldiers had entered the palace. The remaining palace guards also surrendered. Just a minute later, at 9:38, the British Marines raised the Sultan's flag on the roof of the palace. And here, this 38-minute war came to an end. Surprisingly, where 500 people of the Sultan were killed in this whole war, only 1 sailor of the British Navy was injured. Later it was found that Sultan Khalid bin Bargash had taken refuge in East Africa. At that time, there were 2 great powers in East Africa. One was the British and the other was the Germans. There, immediately after the British captured the palace, they made their favorite Sultan Hamoud bin Muhammad the new Sultan of Zanzibar. This 38-minute war in history started a new series of heavy British rule in Zanzibar. After this, Zanzibar became an indirect colony of the British and continued under the leadership of Sultan Hamoud bin Muhammad, And in the next 10 years, 17,200 Zanzibari slaves were freed, and the slave culture of Zanzibar was completely eradicated. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the countries that the British had captured and made their colonies, did this benefit or harm human civilization? What is your opinion about this? I hope you will like and share this video of Ihao channel. Thank you very much for your loving comments. See you in the next great video.